You're listening to Leeds Student Radio. It's 3 o'clock on Thursday the 21st of February. Good afternoon, this is Alex Monk, Nicky Bremner, and joining us today, Jamie Abernethy. And you're listening to...
Sexy Syntax!
Welcome to the fourth broadcast of Sexy Syntax. Today we will be debating how to pronounce the years correctly. If we are to insist on 2013, then why don't we say 2009? Likewise, why say 2009, then switch to 2010? As for the decades, it's clear we are in the tens, but what was the last decade called? This will be all in addition to homophobia in sport, in light of Robbie Rogers recently coming out as openly homosexual. So stay tuned in to Sexy Syntax.
Welcome back to Sexy Syntax, episode 4. Let me introduce our guest this week, Jamie. Hi, Jamie.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me on. It's delightful to be here.
Okay, and where are you from? I can't tell by your accent.
I'm from Liverpool, and I do my best to mask it.
Oh, well.
Mask it? Mask.
Do excuse us if we break into sort of mock Liverpudlian accents like we did last week with our mock American accents. Speaking of last week, I also made the fatal error of saying... referring to the listeners as viewers. I do apologise. I should have said listeners. Now, let's get straight on to the debate. There's two ways in which you can pronounce the years post the year 2000. Yes, okay, so the year 2000, I think we can all agree that you'd pronounce it 2000 or put the word year in front of it, so the year 2000. I think most people are in agreement of that. But what about the next year? Which year follows 2000, Nicky?
2001.
Okay, now there was a film which was released in the 1960s called 2001 Space Odyssey. And the director deliberately wanted it to be pronounced 2001 Space Odyssey so that he could influence the way we say the years, because, you know, logic would dictate that we'd say 2001 instead of 2001, surely. I mean, we said 1901, did we not? I mean, that was the year Queen Victoria died. Which year did the Battle of Hastings occur, Jamie?
1066. Okay,
so you've broken the two numbers apart, so you've got the 10 prefix and the 66 suffix to bring grammar into it. And the National Association of Grammar believe that it's grammatically incorrect to say 2001. We should be saying 2001, not least for consistency, and besides, you save syllables this way. But barely anyone actually refers to the years that way. So we just kept saying 2000 all the way up to 2009, but then we got to 2010, and that was the year where things started to change.
2010, we're finally here.
2010.
2010, I'm all in.
2010.
In 2010.
Late 2010.
Microsoft PowerPoint 2010.
2010, Bob.
2010.
3ds Max 2010.
Well, crap, because the year's 2010, not 2010, right?
The 2010 Toyota Prius.
2010, it's coming. It's going to be a great year.
2010. 2010.
2010.
I'm going to talk about the astrological trends for 2009 to 2010.
Do you say 2010 or 2010?
I say 2010.
Okay, so at some point in your life, you must have been faced by the moral dilemma. You must have been faced by a decision. Are you going to be saying 2010 or are you going to be saying 2010? I mean, what made you switch?
Well, I think it's just a question of which one sounds better. I don't think you are going to struggle to be understood if you choose the wrong one. So I think 2010 and 2012 especially sounds great. I'm unsure about 2013 and think I might switch back for this year, but for 2012...
So you enjoyed 2012, but you thought the 2012 sounded right, but you'll go to 2013 and then you might go back to 2014.
Well, by the time we get to 2020, we clearly want to say 2020, but until then, it seems very much up in the air to me.
Do you not think, though, that people tend to use the 20 prefix when they're talking about future years? So when people are reminiscing, they say, oh yeah, back in 2011. But when they're looking to project to a future date, they'll say, oh, Crossrail will be complete in 2018. Do you not find that's often the case? Because you very rarely hear people saying 2018, 2019, or 2050. But do you not think people tend to say 20 as a sort of a futuristic year?
Yep, that sounds quite right to me. It sounds a very accurate observation.
But it is interesting, though, that you don't like 2013, because I have to say, when the clock struck midnight and we entered the year we're in now, 2013, I haven't heard anyone say 2013, and we're in February now. I haven't heard anyone say 2013 apart from Nicky, and that is a true fact. So most people seem to have taken to 2013, and I think that's because of the London Olympics coming, being branded as 2012, and it's really stuck. I mean, Nicky, you're a big advocate for 2000, and that's not necessarily wrong. I mean, is there a reason why you say 2000?
Well, to go back to what Jamie was saying, I think it just sounds better.
Okay, now you're going to continue to say 2000 and up until 2099?
Well, I can't say that I will. I might not be alive in 2099. I hope I am. But yeah, I think I'm going to continue to say it until it sounds wrong, and I can't really say when that will happen. But for me, it just sounds wrong to say. I think that the closer you are to 2000, the year 2000, it doesn't sound right to say like 2001. It just sounds like two numbers that are sort of just next to each other, but it doesn't sound like a year. And I know what you're gonna say. I know that we're gonna say that we said 1996, and there were two separate numbers, which incidentally they don't say in other other languages. They just say the year.
What do they say in Spanish then?
They say like the equivalent of, for 1996 they would say like 1996.
Oh.
1996. Is that right, Jamie?
I think you might be right there, Nicky.
You both do Spanish.
Yeah.
Or have lived in countries that speak Spanish. I mean, there's many play it safe options. Have you noticed it's quite street cred to say 2K13, 2K12? Have you ever encountered that before?
I've never heard that.
Have you never heard that
No.
one? Okay, what about people who say 06, 09? Or my grandma Nanny Pickles or Nana Kitten. She my last words to her at Christmas were, "I'll see you in 13." We dropped the prefix completely because it's sit on the fence.
I made a mistake, didn't I? I said I was on a YouTube video and it just said I was literally reading the YouTube video and it said 08, so I can't be judged for that. But then I did say 012, didn't I? Which is absolutely
that is
ludicrous.
Awful. But 08, I mean, if I said to someone, oh yeah, when the recession started back in 08, I think most people would totally accept that. I mean, what about FIFA as well? FIFA 09. People are used to O, but as soon as you put the 20 in front of it, people suddenly give you weird looks. But there's plenty of people in the media who do use the 20 prefix for the years between 2001 and 2009. Here's a little compilation I've made.
Well, Pope Benedict was elected to the papacy in 2005. In 2010, he visited Britain.
What year was that, I think? It was in 2005, when the boys were 4.
In 2009, the Netherlands had 5.3 births per 1,000 women.
Who was succeeded by George Osborne as MP for Chatham in 2001, in 1992 and 2004 respectively?
1990 to 2005. In 2003, now a decade ago.
For example, the Conservatives only managed to boost their vote between 2005 and 2010.
I think we're in a switchover period, and I think it's clear people are still not sure whether some people just say it randomly. They might say 2010 one day, they might say 2010 another day. We're still in a switchover period. Here's an interesting question. The next century. Let's pick on Jamie. Jamie, how are you going to say that year? The year which comes after 2099.
2100?
Correct. But then it will be it is and then 2101 and 2102.
It can't be 2100. It's got to be 2100. Party over.
Or 2100 maybe. Do you think that sounds
2100? This
contender?
is the indisputable winner of that.
Well, as long as you're consistent. So if you're going to say 2012, 2013, then you should say 2008, 2009. Just be consistent.
But then does that mean that I'm going to have to say like 1996?
Oh my goodness, yeah, you've opened a new can of worms there.
It's just because when we said the year 2000, the year 2000, we weren't going to say like 2000, were we?
Oh no, of course not. I mean, I think the year 2000 deserves to be celebrated. I mean, it's It's a special year.
Yeah, 2001 though, that sounds great, doesn't it?
Why is consistency so important? Why can't I chop and change depending on how I feel? Like I'd change the colour of my jumper.
Well, you might confuse people. I don't know. I think
that's an excellent topic to get into in a little bit more detail, Jamie. I think you're absolutely right. You know, why is this obsession with getting things correct and right? But that is the overlying principle and topic of sexy syntax.
Okay, so we've discussed the years. How about the decades? I mean, if I was to say to you, Nicky, what decade are we in now? See, it's not an easy answer, is it? It's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
You know, you've heard of you were born in the...
I was born in the 80s.
Yeah, okay, so that's easy. Everyone says 1980s or 80s.
Yeah.
So what about this decade? If someone was born in this decade, are they a child of the
year 2000s?
But we're in a new decade now, Nicky.
The first 10 years of the...
But we're not in... we're now past 2010.
Oh, right. Oh, we're in the 10s then.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, this decade, I'm expecting to say the one from 00 because that is hard. And I know what you're going to say for that as well.
Oh, well, there's many contenders. I've read, I mean, if you do some research on the World Wide Web, these are the different contenders. The zeros, this is for the last decade, by the way. The zeros, the Bush days, the new millennium, a little bit vague.
What's that got to do with anything?
The aughts, but the best, and the one which I think the majority are in favour of, is the noughties. I mean,
absolutely.
Do you think the noughties sounds weird, or do you think noughties sounds apt?
I think it's a brilliant summary. Everything you need to know about those 10 years is contained in that way of describing them.
Any highlights in the noughties, you'd say?
Well, just the naughty behaviour of celebrities.
Yeah, it's definitely a decade we associate with celebrity culture and Big Brother and Pop Idol and, naughty behaviour. I mean, what other alternatives are there? Because if you say the 2000, that kind of implies the entire century. If someone said the 1700s, you'd think of the period between 1700 and 1799, surely. So 2000s is still a little bit vague. So maybe the noughties is what we should stick to. So you've got 80s, 90s, noughties. But yes, going back to the decade we're in now, 10s makes absolute sense, or 2010s, 1910s,
but 2010s. If you say the 10s, then it might not be clear whether it was the 1910s or the 2010s.
Yeah, but then you could say, if you say the 90s, or you could say you were born in the 80s, were you born in the 1880s or the 1980s?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So if you just say the 80s, it's not enough, so you have to say the 2080s.
Well, okay. Well,
I don't think I would say that, actually.
You just say 2010s then.
Maybe it is time for change, maybe I need to change, but I mean, I just don't feel comfortable changing now. the noughties doesn't seem... right, it just doesn't. It sounds
2010s.
Stupid.
Does the 2010s sound comfortable? Or would you say the 2010s?
To be honest, I've never really said that. I've never said the decade, ever. Have you ever said what decade are you in now? Because you normally talk about decades when you refer to them in the past.
Yeah, true.
But 2010 for me sounds great.
Okay, well, if you're happy with that, just be consistent. And to be honest with you, I was saying 2000 and up until about last year, I would say that's when I made the decision, life-changing decision, to adopt the 20 prefix, not just for years post-2010, but also 2001, 2009, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, we'll let you decide, listeners. You can decide, and
readers,
please tell us what you say, and next week we'll try and tell you all which was the most favourable option and which was the most favourable name for the decades. Okay, so moving on to the next section of our show then, we're going to be discussing homophobia, specifically in relation to sport.
Yes, Robbie Rogers, the former Leeds United and USA footballer, has come out as homosexual. And he's only the second person to formally come out, the second footballer in history. And I say former Leeds United and USA footballer because he's actually retired as well from the professional game, and he's going to do different things with his life now. I thought this was really interesting, and we were going to talk about homosexuality and homophobia on this show, and I thought it would be a very relevant thing to talk about in this show. Because how is it possible that a sportsman, a person, is now unable to continue in the job that he is doing, who's very good at, very successful at, just because he's gay? Can you believe that, Alex?
No, it's just such an eye opener. I mean, obviously there's this kind of inherent homophobia going on in the world of football, and it's almost like a different world when they're in that football bubble. To be gay is suddenly something really, really bad, but as soon as they're out of that football bubble, it seems fine. I mean, how can it affect someone's career? I don't know.
What do you think, Jamie, about the homophobia in football?
Well, I think it's interesting that Alex called it a football bubble, and I guess the wider question is whether what we see in football today reflects society at large. And I think what's particularly interesting is that if you speak to any football club and any football player about it, they'll say that they're really looking forward to someone being able to come out and it would be a really good thing for the game, and the kind of thing they'd be entirely behind. And yet still no one does whilst the discourse is that they are completely open and pro-equality, obviously the actual reality is one of a hostile atmosphere.
Absolutely. I think, I've been to lots of games of football, Newcastle United and others away, and there's a lot of homophobia at the games. It's disgraceful, really. I think, if you're not homophobic, you sort of, you shouldn't fit in there, what are you doing? And it's an absolute disgrace. I mean, I'll openly say that Newcastle United fans, a lot of them are homophobic. They're embarrassing. I really hate it. I remember when Jermaine Genius was being criticised and everyone was, shouting at him saying that he was gay and the blah 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 and the goldfish bowl and all this. It was absolutely disgraceful. It was just a horrible thing. I mean, it's not enough is done about that, in my opinion. I mean, we do a lot about racism, or that's much more in the public eye, but it just seems to be this unwritten rule that it's just when you're with the lads at the game, you're sort of allowed to do it. And so I'd agree with Alex there.
Is it something that's is dying out, though, would you say? In recent games, is there less homophobia than there was maybe a decade ago?
Well, I can't really say, because, I mean, obviously, we had the incident with Justin Fashanu, who actually committed suicide in 1998. He was the first footballer to come out officially, to be gay. And I'm sure that things were worse back then. But if I were to compare racism to homophobia, I would say that homophobia hasn't changed at all. At least with the generations that I go to the football with. Jamie, what would you think?
Again, absolutely not. I would say there's a lot more awareness that something ought to be done, and there's a lot more talk, but the actual atmosphere seems to me to be as homophobic as ever.
Totally agree with that. So do you think that there should be more? I mean, they have done sort of panorama shows about homophobia in football. There was the interviews with Graham Lasso and things like that, but there doesn't seem to be a massive, campaign against homophobia in football or in sport in general, I would say. Do you agree with that, Jamie?
Well, think about why you feel that racism isn't such a problem as before. Do you feel that these campaigns actually work, or why do you feel, or how do you think we got rid of the blight of racism for the game, and do you think that would work with homophobia?
I think that in theory, yes, but I'm just thinking of the sort of, well, yeah, I suppose because you've got people who have been brought up to be racist, and there's mass immigration into the UK, and people might perceive that they don't have as many opportunities now because there's people coming from all areas of the globe and taking their jobs or whatever. So there is that sort of inherent, you do feel a racism, but you feel that people now are so scared to do it, or they actually there's so much pressure on them not to be racist that they're not. So yeah, I think that, I mean, we're here at the university. It's almost like a bubble here at the university of sort of anti-homophobia.
Yeah, I'd definitely agree with that. I mean, it's just uncool to be homophobic at this university, whether you play football on a Sunday or not. I mean, it's just something that doesn't happen. And likewise, you don't discriminate race, you don't discriminate religion, you don't discriminate socioeconomic background. I mean, it's interesting how the parameters are different depending. I mean, racism seems to be treated a lot more differently than homophobia. But yet, why is the difference between the colour of someone's skin and their sexual orientation? Why is the colour of someone's skin treated with more strictness and more? Why is it emphasised more?
Jamie?
Well, thinking exclusively about why young men in football would feel they need to be homophobic, or why they would feel a dislike or disgust or apprehension towards associating with gay young men. I think that a lot of these individuals are incredibly insecure, and if there's one thing about insecure people and what they don't like seeing, it's difference, and they perceive this as a threat to themselves, a threat to the way that they see the world, the way it shows up for them. And that is why I would think that it's a particular issue in football. I think if we look at race, that it doesn't. If you're a professional footballer today, then it doesn't show up as threatening that there are people from all over the globe playing in your league, because the benefits of that are so readily apparent to all the millionaires.
I think that's a really good point. And also, another thing worth considering is, what about changing room culture? Okay, a white guy getting changed next to a black guy and they're both straight, that's fine, but someone who's homophobic might think, oh goodness, there's a gay person in the changing room, they might be perving on me. There might be a bit of that culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a sort of unwritten rule when you're with the lads, in football, and I assume it's the same in things like rugby. All the jokes are, you're very manly, and we've got to be very manly and talk about how many women we're going to pull tonight and all this, and it is that culture. And I mean, I think it would be so difficult. I think I really respect this Robbie Rogers for coming out. I'm a bit disappointed though that he feels that he can't carry on. That he can't carry on in this world as a professional footballer. I mean, he's not a world class player, but he's a professional footballer who's represented the United States, multiple times, and I think it's really sad. I think that that there should be more done, and I think that football has a really big responsibility in society for helping deal with issues in society as a whole, because so many people watch it, and so many people, especially young people, are influenced by it. That I think that if they did more, as they have with racism, I think it would be much better. And you were saying, Alex, though, about do the people that play football are those people just not gay people? Is football just a thing that? I mean, that's a massive generalisation in itself, but
it probably on average doesn't attract that many gay people compared with straight people. I mean, I think that's true.
But if you're sort of stereotyping, footballers as a very manly, and homosexual people as camp or feminine and not interested in sort of the typical stereotypical activities that the stereotypical straight manly man.
Yeah, it's all about stereotypes, isn't it? I know. Is there any, since this is sexy syntax and we speak about language, would you say there's any particular terms used within football which are homophobic? Any particular strong examples?
Can you think of any, Jamie?
Not off the top of my head, I can't. Not exclusive to football,
not
anyway.
Exclusive to football,
okay,
but there's a lot.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot, but there kind of is a sort of if a player is running around and he's not sort of hard and he's not chasing, or he wears gloves, for example, to play football, they think, oh God, he's a pansy, or he's a puff, or he's a faggot or something. Would you agree with that, Jamie?
Absolutely. You'd hear all the standard homophobic words yelled out ad nauseum on the terraces every weekend.
Yeah, I agree. Jamie, do you want to just to finish this? I think it's a really interesting topic. Just to finish, do you have that quote that you were reading?
I do, from the American cousins. Chris Culliver, who played in the Super Bowl this weekend, said before it, "I don't do gay guys, man. I don't do that. No, we don't got no gay guys on the team. They got to get up out of here if they do." And this is from the team in San Francisco, a city which is typically associated with the gay subculture in the United States. And the team has a big outreach program among gay men and does a lot of PR work based on this. And yet the actual atmosphere within the changing room is like our good friend Chris said.
Well, there you go. So send us the translations of what was said there, and any grammatical mistakes. We'll be happy to hear them. We'll move on now to the pronunciation section. It's the final part of each show. So, Alex,
yep, 3 words as always. Let's start with word number 1.
Harassment.
Harassment.
Okay, so let's start with this. I mean, In the 1970s, there was a programme called Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, very, very popular. In fact, the programme was so successful that the wrong pronunciation of harassment became very fashionable and now is regularly used by the majority of the population, because there was a character in there who would say, "Stop harassing me." And as he said, "Stop harassing me," the audience laughter would come on. And the main reason why there was laughter was it was a joke. You know, he couldn't pronounce the word harassing correctly. It's the same for the verb harass. It's the same for the noun harassment, harassed, whatever. It should have stress on the first syllable. And I think it's quite common still to hear harassment with stress on the first syllable, but certainly the verb harass tends to be pronounced harass. It is American, that pronunciation, but like I say, Britain's been really influenced by this one programme. I mean, did you know that it could be pronounced the other way, how I've been pronouncing it? Or have you always been totally oblivious to harass? You've always heard it as harass.
Yes, I've always heard it as harass, and harass kind of sounds wrong, as does the
naughties. It does kind of sound wrong. What about you, Jamie? Have you ever heard anyone say harassment?
I probably have, and it wouldn't have struck me as straight up wrong. It would strike me as a little posh, though.
Yeah,
it is very Radio 4 when they were talking about the Jimmy Savile scandal and sexual harassment. You know, that's an example. Although I've got a friend, she's not posh at all. She works in HR, and a lot of HR work these days is on bullying and harassment, and she pronounces it harassment, and without it's often the culture you're in. So the next word then on the list,
mischievous.
Mischievous. So I put stress on the first syllable, and these two put stress on the second syllable. But not only did they do that, they also implied that there was an I after the V, mischievous. But when you actually spell the word, it isn't spelt with an I after the V at all. And I think this is a word which people often misspell because they've been pronouncing it mischievous. But what's interesting about this word is there's a lot of research to suggest that it's a shift in age. Older speakers tend to say mischievous, younger speakers tend to say mischievous.
Mischievous.
Oh, mischievous.
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 Mischievous?
Yeah. I'd say mischievous.
And
but I probably would spell
mischievous.
It wrong.
Mischievous. What would you say?
There's no I there.
Mischievous.
Mischievous.
Oh, all right. Well, I expect you're right, but I would say mischievous.
Can I just say that so if the majority of the population again is pronouncing it mischievous, could we not advocate a change of spelling?
Oh, I don't know. But
Jamie?
Well, yeah, you're talking usage versus the dictionary there, and then there'll be dictionary wars all over again. So
I would have thought the spelling will remain the same, but if you want to go over to mischievous as a standard pronunciation, that will happen. Last letter,
H.
For once, we all agree. Now, there is another variant.
Disgraceful.
It is
H.
absolutely disgraceful, and I think most people would agree that
no, it's not
H,
disgraceful. If you say H, you know, for me it sounds awful, but
it doesn't. But this is it. I mean, people say H quite a lot now, and again, it's the shift. There's only one country where H is standard, and that is Ireland. In the USA, it's H. In Britain, it's H. So, you know, shall we for once not blame the Americans? Shall we for once blame the Irish for this?
That's fine. I'm happy to blame the Irish.
Let's blame the Irish for H. I mean, fair enough. When you're learning it, people, you know, it makes a H sound. You're going to learn the word harassment. You'll assume it's the letter H.
Yeah, but it's difficult to say H.
I know, but you know, people forget that there's words like hour. Now, hour is spelt, or R.
Yeah, with a silent H.
It's spelt with a silent H, and you know, H-R, it makes sense. So, what about anhistoric? Have you ever heard anyone say anhistoric?
Hate that. It should be ahistoric.
It should be ahistoric, really, shouldn't it? But I think people say anhistoric, again, an-H.
That
it's
always
really,
sounds
really
wrong for
confusing. And that's all we've got time for on Sexy Syntax. We're followed, as always, by The Lowdown. We'd like to thank our guest, Jamie, for being with us today.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks for having me.
And we hope we haven't harassed you too much today. And awful jokes to end on. And here are the advertisements. Thank you.
Let's just understand this. What happened to A&E Waste between 2010 2004 and 2010.